You ever notice how, as you get older, your social circle seems to shrink, but at the same time, you kind of feel happier, calmer? Well, today, we're diving into the pretty surprising science behind that exact feeling.
It's a really common experience, right? The nonstop pace of your younger years, all the parties, all the people, it just fades. And it's replaced by quieter nights and, yeah, a much shorter contact list. And yet, there's this sense of peace that starts to grow. So how is it possible that less can actually be more when it comes to our friends? Let's get into it. Okay, so first things first, let's talk about what's going on up here, inside our heads. Because this isn't just about your personal preferences changing. Nope. It's actually a deep biological rewiring of your brain as you move through life.
Think about it. When you're in your 20s, a whole decade feels like an eternity. You're basically programmed to explore, to gather up as many new experiences and new people as you can. But as we age, our whole perception of time starts to shift. We become really aware that it's not infinite. And that one little change rewires everything.
And this brings us to this really cool idea in psychology. It's called socio-emotional selectivity theory. I know it's a mouthful, but the idea behind it is actually pretty simple and profound. As our brain finally gets the memo that time is a finite resource, we naturally shift our focus. We move away from exploration, what's new, what's next, and we move toward emotional meaning, what actually matters to me.
So here's a good way to look at it. When we're young, our main goal is exploration. We're casting this huge, wide net, right? Trying to collect as many experiences and people as possible. But as we mature, the goal changes. It becomes all about meaning and depth. We start pulling in that net and focusing our energy only on nurturing the relationships that give us real, genuine emotional support.
And check this out. There's a part of our brain called the default mode network. This is the network that lights up when we're not focused on the outside world, when we're just thinking, self-reflecting, daydreaming, getting lost in thought. As we get older, a lot of us find that just activating this network, maybe through reading or just quiet time, becomes way more fulfilling than constant social noise. We actually start to enjoy our own company.
Okay, so we've got the internal brain science down. But what about how our real-world experiences shape all of this? Because, let's be honest, life is a pretty incredible teacher and an even better filter for people.
With every year that goes by, your brain becomes this absolute master of social pattern recognition. Seriously, after thousands and thousands of conversations and interactions, it builds this kind of internal radar system. It gets really good at subconsciously flagging the signs of relationships that are just, draining.
And you know exactly what patterns I'm talking about, right? The subtle manipulation. The friendships that feel totally one-sided. That fake surface-level friendliness. You get so much better at spotting these things, and you learn, sometimes the hard way, that these interactions just deplete your energy. So your brain starts to realize that avoiding them isn't being antisocial. It's just smart self-preservation.
And when we constantly ignore those red flags, we risk hitting emotional burnout, that feeling of just being completely wiped out by social stuff. And it's not some kind of personal failure. It's a defense mechanism. It's literally your mind screaming, hey, stop. Let's save our energy for the people who actually fill our cup, not drain it.
And all of this leads to this really powerful psychological shift. When we're young, so much of our energy is spent just trying to be liked by everyone. But as you mature, that need gets replaced by something much, much deeper. The need to be respected by a few. And true respect, well, that's built on being your authentic self, which is pretty much impossible to do when you're trying to please a massive, superficial social circle. Which brings us right to our third point. This big realization that having a smaller social circle isn't a failure. Not at all. In fact, it's an incredibly smart and effective strategy for living a happier life. I love this concept. Let's think of your social energy like your phone battery. There's this theory called ego depletion, which basically says we start every day with a full charge. But every single social interaction, especially the stressful ones, drains a piece of that battery. So the wisest thing to do is to invest that limited energy only in the connections that actually recharge you, instead of the ones that leave you at 1%.
In this quote from Bertrand Russell, it kind of hits the nail on the head. It helps explain why thoughtful, deeper-thinking people tend to be more selective. When you're naturally analytical, you question things more, including the quality of your own relationships. And that questioning just leads you to be way more choosy about who gets your time.
So it is time to officially bust a huge myth. The equation for happiness is not more friends equals less loneliness. That's just wrong. The actual psychological reality is that a few high-quality, authentic connections are our best defense against feeling lonely. I mean, come on, we've all been in a room packed with people and felt completely and utterly alone.
Okay, this brings us to our final and honestly most empowering section: how you can consciously, deliberately build a life that protects your inner peace. And the absolute most important tool in your toolkit for this? Learning the art of setting boundaries. But this brings up a really critical question that we all have to ask ourselves. Are we building a boundary that comes from a place of self-respect, or are we building a wall that comes from a place of fear? Because from the outside, they can look pretty similar, but their purpose and their results are just worlds apart.
See, a wall is usually a product of past pain. It's a defense mechanism that basically screams, "Stay away from me." And what it leads to ultimately is isolation. A boundary, though, that's totally different. A boundary is an act of self-respect. It's more like a gate, and it says, "I welcome genuine connection, but only with people who treat me right." It's not about shutting people out. It's about carefully letting the right people in.
And hey, if you're still not totally convinced that this whole quality over quantity thing is for real, just consider this. Everything we've been talking about is backed up by one of the longest, most comprehensive studies on human life ever conducted. And what they found was that the single biggest predictor of a long, happy life, it wasn't money, it wasn't career success, and it definitely wasn't fame.
After following people for more than 80 years, I mean, think about that, 80 years, the Harvard study of adult development came to one crystal clear conclusion. The quality of our close relationships is the single most important factor for our long-term health and happiness. Period. So let's just quickly wrap it all up. Choosing real, meaningful connections, that's a sign of maturity. Your brain is literally hardwired to do it as you age. Learning to spot social drama is a skill that protects your peace. And setting healthy boundaries, that's the secret to real relationships. At the end of the day, true happiness is absolutely not a popularity contest.
And I want to leave you with this really profound thought from the psychologist Carl Rogers. You know, maybe this whole journey of trimming down our social circles is really just a journey toward accepting ourselves. It's about accepting that we don't need a huge crowd to tell us we're worthy, and that our own inner peace is a treasure that's worth protecting. Because once we truly accept ourselves, we're finally free to build a social world that might be smaller, sure, but is infinitely more real.